Everybody, welcome to our latest webinar. Today we are talking about all things that you need to know about our referral system. I don't know if you saw the big announcement, but last month we officially hit 700 referrals, and it has just been such an honor and a privilege to work with each and every single one of you on this endeavor. If you have participated in our referral system, then you have undoubtedly worked with Calvin. So he's going to walk us through all of the things. About 2 months ago, we actually updated the way that we did the form. And I think Calvin's going to go into it, but just a spoiler, the modifications we made has helped increase self-referrals, and we have been thrilled by that. So he's going to talk about the impact that has and some additional exciting things happening in the future as we continue to grow as a community and ensure that the process of survivors getting access to services continues to enhance and improve. So thank you for being here and being a part of this. And with that, I have to do the Zoom housekeeping thing. So with that, the purpose here is to make sure that you all are clear on the ins and outs of how to send a referral. We want to dispel any myths or unmet expectations in terms of time frame and how many responses you should get and how quickly Calvin will respond to you, what the follow-up looks like. So the ins and outs of our referral system. One thing to note is this is being recorded. And so if you have colleagues that you want to watch this at a later date, please feel free to send it out to them. This is informational. We want as many people to be able to access it as possible. And then we've done this before, guys. If you have questions, put it in the chat box. We will address them at the end of Calvin's presentation. And with that, we're going to get started so we can get through this as quickly as possible and have time left over for Q&A. So Calvin, take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. Melissa, just check me. You can see my share screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right, everybody. Like Melissa said, my name is Calvin Fanning, and I am the Alliance Referral System Manager. We're going to swing back to that plug about our conference at the end, so don't let me forget about that. So just some kind of basic background about the Alliance Referral System. Like Melissa said, just last month, we hit over 700 referrals that we've been able to serve. So that's incredibly exciting. I think the last time we did a webinar like this was in May, and we reported 500. So that growth rate is kind of astronomical. So we appreciate everything that you guys have done to help with that. We're also represented by over 35 states with those in ARS who are residential programs and we're able to refer out to. And that's about 125, give or take. That number does change pretty frequently in terms of receiving agencies based on opens and closures, and everyone's doing staff overturn and COVID. So we always say it's about 125, but that's a number we're actively trying to grow. So I'm also going to do another plug later in this presentation for you guys to give us recommendations for new people we could add as receiving agencies. Some other things to know, you actually don't have to be a member of NTSA to submit or receive a referral. And our receiving agency network actually extends beyond NTSA membership. We do that purposefully just so that we have as many options for survivors in our system as possible. Like I said, ARS is intentionally cultivated to be a national network of service providers because geography is really important to a lot of survivors. So if we have a referral coming from Florida and that individual doesn't feel safe there, they want to get as far away from there as possible, we want to be able to contact our people in Washington State so that they can be in a program that they're actually safe and comfortable in. So like I said, we are trying to expand these numbers. As many as possible that we can add is incredibly helpful. So that's just something to note. All right. So again, just kind of laying some groundwork for everybody. This is just some basic terminology that we use when we're referring to the referral process. And so just to kind of eliminate any kind of confusion as we go through this, I'm just going to unpack these really fast. So referral is the process of submitting a survivor's information and a request for placement in a program. So that's not to be confused with how we use referral with like in healthcare professions. So it's not a recommendation from, say, your primary care provider to go to a specialist. Anyone can make a referral. We'll kind of cover that a little bit more. Like I said, the referrer is anyone submitting a referral request for services, either for themselves or on behalf of another. And then a survivor advocate, anyone who represents the interests of a survivor and who is submitting a referral on their behalf. So this is kind of a proxy, whether professionally as a volunteer or just as a community member or a layperson. This is kind of catch-all terminology for when someone is referring a referral by proxy. So if it's not a self-referral, and can include case managers at a drop-in center, domestic violence shelters, churches, or a staff person at an existing residential care program. Could also be a family member, a friend, law enforcement, counselors and therapists, really anyone. A service provider is anyone offering tangible services, primarily a shelter or a residential program for our purposes, to trafficking survivors. These may include some people who are offering non-residential services, such as case management only, but for the purposes of ARS referrals, we're typically dealing with residential programs. Finally, receiving agency is anyone actively accepting a survivor, anyone receiving the referrals and a request for services. So we'll kind of cover these entities a little bit more. Receiving agency is mostly synonymous with service providers, but only service providers who meet the referral needs will be receiving agency, and we'll kind of unpack that a bit more too. Finally, placement is actively accepting a survivor into a program and or offering them services and arranging for transport and intake. So you'll hear that here and there through the presentation. And intake is the period after accepting a resident into a program begins, and that residential program starts to conduct their own setting up case files and kind of intake processing procedures. Again, that's a quick rundown, and we'll address all of that in a little bit more detail, but hopefully we're all on the same page there. So who's involved in the referral process? I like to kind of categorize three main entities or stakeholders. First, there's you as the survivor or survivor advocate, who is submitting the referral and is seeking placement in a program. There is us, the ARS team, which is facilitating the referral distribution to the ARS network, which we kind of just talked about, which is composed of these service providers or anti-trafficking shelters who are receiving the survival referrals. So those three entities kind of comprise a four-part process. I know we're running through all this very fast. All of this information is kind of in a more rudimentary form on our website for anyone just curious to learn more about the ins and outs of referrals. But just a quick four-part breakdown. So for survivors and survivor advocates, making a referral, it starts by filling out the online referral form. Like I said, that's on our website at shelteredalliance.org/ARS. The form has been updated in the last several months, as Melissa said, so do check out our website to see that. If you haven't submitted a referral recently, do note that the new form is an online submission and no longer that old 3-page PDF. So if you still have that on file, make sure you check the website to see what the updated version is. And we aren't accepting the old PDF form anymore. So the survivor advocate answers all of the questions to the best of their ability and then just submit the form. So that's step one. Step two is the ARS team. So our team will let you know as the referrer that we received the referral form, and then we make sure to collect any additional information from you that would be helpful to know for placement. And then after confirmation that the referral form is complete, we match the form's information with the relevant residential programs in our system. And then all of the eligible programs will then receive the referral form in a newly adapted PDF form for their use in their office. All right, step 3. After a program receives the referral, they will assess whether or not they have the availability and the capability for a new resident. Those of you who are shelter homes, you know that things change very quickly, so we let you assess that on your own. They then review the form to confirm that they are able to meet the survivor's unique needs, as well as determine if there are any indicators that the survivor may not be a good fit for their program. So it kind of starts that conversation between the receiving agencies and the referrers. If both of those are a yes, then the receiving agency will reach out to the contact on the referral form to introduce themselves and share more about their program. So that's kind of completing the circle in some regard. It's really important for you as referrers to make sure that that contact information in the form is accurate, because that's really the only means of communication that we as the ARS team and receiving agencies will have to get a hold of you and let you know about their openings. All right, so if all goes well, final stage is placement. After being contacted by those matching residential programs that the form was sent out to about availability, you and the survivor that you're working with can assess which programs are the best choice for you. The potential service provider can also ask you any additional details about the survivor's situation that would be helpful. So again, that starts that conversation between those two entities directly. And then once placement is decided, it's the responsibility of the receiving agency to work with you for any additional intake procedures, applications, interviews that are necessary, and then arranging transportation so that they're officially placed in that program. And that kind of wraps up the process. So at that point, we consider that referral case closed. You are likely moving on to other cases and trying to help other survivors, knowing that that survivor that you've just worked with is placed in a residential care program. All right, so this slide is really just a summation of what we just talked about. This graphic is actually also available on our website. So if anyone needs to reference it just for clarity about this process, that's there with some additional unpacking and some information. As you can see, it is a 4-part process, and ARS is designed to streamline that process of finding placement for survivors, but it can still take some time. As you can see, there are multiple steps of communication and assessment by these 3 different points of participation, so it's just natural for it to take a little bit of time. And again, you can reference all of this at our webpage. I hope that makes it a little bit simpler. All right, so now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of just some things that we've observed that I think would be helpful for you to know when making a referral. Just a note on terminology, our new form is geared towards kind of prioritizing the survivor. So the language is directed directly at them. And so you will notice that I interchange between addressing you as the survivor and or a survivor advocate, because that is who is making the referral, and we just want to make it clear that this is accessible to make a self-referral. So just a note there. So who is eligible for placement in a program? Basically, who is using this service? Service providers in ARS do primarily serve survivors of trafficking. That includes both labor and sex trafficking, but also those that have experienced prostitution, pornography, survival sex, or some other form of commercial sex. We note that just because there are some cases that are not human trafficking, and those typically aren't going to be eligible for the programs in our system. And we do prioritize those individuals, those victims. I will say that ARS is more suited for looking for a residential recovery program. So typically those are 30 days or more. However, it's not suited for those who are looking strictly for homeless relief. Again, it does prioritize victims of trafficking and getting them the care that they need. To reiterate, it can take some time to successfully find placement. That said, ARS is better suited for individuals currently in a safe situation, if only temporarily. While there are emergency services in our system, they are fewer. So if you're a regular referrer at a drop-in or a resource center, we recommend having several local options for temporary safe housing, whether that's through a local homeless shelter, a domestic violence shelter, or other solutions, just to get that individual, if they're coming to you in an emergency, unsafe situation to get them in a safe place for a week or two while we can sort out finding longer term placement. And we do want you to have enough time to assess these programs and make sure that you're making the best choice for this survivor to kind of have success in a long-term program. All right, so that is who the survivors are, who's using the system, but who can make a referral, as we said. The intent of the referral system is that it can be used by anyone. One of the reasons we put it on an online form is that that's a little bit more accessible. You can fill it out on your phone, and it's putting that form directly in the hands of survivors. So we're glad that that has been a positive in that update. It can be used by anyone, including survivors, advocates, case managers, friends and family, law enforcement, kind of the whole gamut. Anybody who's in a position to represent a survivor and kind of work as their proxy for this referral process. If you're working in a safe house or as a service provider, you may find that you're actually sometimes a referrer and you're also a receiving agency. So you can kind of wear both hats. Some of you on this call might wear both hats. Many programs use our system for someone, if someone is referred to them, but they don't have the capacity right now or don't have the resources to serve that individual. And some find that after a trial period in their program, they need to find an alternative for a particular resident or participant, and that's fairly common. If you're an advocate, don't forget to make this process as cooperative with the survivor as possible. We typically won't handle a referral if it does not have the consent of the survivor. And it really is designed to sort of do with a survivor. I understand that a lot of you, if you're case managers, you could probably fill the form out without asking any questions of the survivor, but we do want that to be a cooperative process. So just remember to incorporate that and to make sure that you are submitting the form on their behalf with their consent. All right, so those are kind of the people involved. And now we're gonna take a somewhat deep dive into the referral form itself. Mostly I wanna explain what our reasons for in asking certain questions. I will say that our form is designed, again, with the survivor in mind. So we try to minimize the number of details that we ask. However, we have fairly successfully assessed the questions that are on there, and we found them to be very relevant and very helpful for finding placement. So they all do have a reason, and I'll kind of walk through some of that. So that information, first and foremost, is intended to be non-identifying on the form. So please do not include a survivor's name on the form. And if able, if you're providing their email address and that email address identifies them by name, for instance, cfanning@Sheltered Alliance probably wouldn't be one that I wanted to use because it does identify me. You can always ask if they have an alternative email. And if not, we just simply ask, and I will follow up with you just to make sure that you, the survivor, or you, the advocate, is comfortable including some form of potentially identifying information. That said, the forms are coded. So we do ask that you provide the survivor's initials and age, but that's really all, that's the only name that we have on the form. And again, that's just intended to protect privacy. Obviously, when you start talking to service providers that have availability, you can share as much information over phone or email as you want, but this way it is kept private for as long as possible. Like I said, questions on the form do address the survivor directly. So that might be a little bit off-putting whenever you're filling out the form on someone's behalf. Like I said, we want the referral process to be as focused on the survivor as possible. So if you're an advocate completing a form on behalf of someone else, you'll see that each question is designed to be asked of the survivor directly. And that's also intended to help you kind of facilitate the asking of those questions and just keep it directed at them and their preferences and the services needed and things like that. So if you're new to the new form, we'll find that that's a pretty big difference. So contact information, like I said, is very important. Be sure to include accurate contact information, like I said, since this is the means by which ARS will contact you and any receiving agencies. We have in the past had typos in those email addresses and phone numbers, and it's kind of impossible to reach that person seeking services. So do just double check that. That saves us a lot of time. And especially when time is of the essence for these survivors, we want to prioritize that. Also be sure to discuss with a survivor you're working with whether they want the point of contact to be you for follow-up, you as the advocate, or themselves. So if you're working closely with someone and they're comfortable with you kind of representing them in this process, that is certainly fine. Just make sure to have a conversation about it. So information for placement. This area is primarily dedicated to expressing any preferences for placement that a survivor might have. This is their chance to decide what level of supervision they want and or need in a program, how they want faith to be incorporated, if at all, into the program, and what their participation in that would look like. And then any geographic restrictions or preferences, like we said, that can be important to a lot of survivors. They might want to stay in an area where they have family and some community, or they might need to get away from that community. So that's an important part that we want to be sure to ask. As an advocate, we do encourage you to be honest when working with survivors to make the best decision for them. So we want to make it so that there's a high probability for placement as possible, but also the greatest likelihood for long-term success for survivors. That said, just to boil that statement down, if you feel that a survivor, you have a good relationship with them and you feel like you need to nudge them towards maybe some higher level supervision programs, just feel free to judge that, because again, we do want them to have as many options as possible, but also exactly what they need. And you might be in a position to help them determine that. Services, that's another section in the form itself. We do ask about the type of exploitation, again, just to match them with appropriate services. We also ask how trafficking was verified, and this can be pretty important to some receiving agencies. Obviously, you use your discretion, but that can be, again, for those services that are completely restricted to only serving trafficking victims, they might like to have that verified. We also ask how long ago an experience with trafficking or exploitation was for an individual. Again, for those services that are kind of restrictive in their mission, we just want to make sure that we're efficiently communicating and not sending a referral to someone who will likely not be able to serve them. We do ask some legal questions. We ask about citizenship, again, trying to match those services appropriately. We also ask about court requirements and legal obligations. And this is one that I have conversations with individuals on pretty regularly. It can be the case that if an individual is on parole or probation or has an upcoming court date, it might restrict if and how they're able to leave the state. So that will determine who we can send the referral form to. So just be aware of that and know that that might be a point that you need to follow up on. Otherwise, I will follow up with you. So if you want to just nip that in the bud, that's always helpful. And then health. Again, this is important to receiving agencies just as they gauge their ability to serve individuals. We've found, some organizations, their property has all of the bedrooms on the second floor and no elevator. So we would likely not send someone who is wheelchair bound or has severe mobility issues to them. We also ask about severe physical disabilities, like I said, and also diagnosed psychiatric and or cognitive disorders. Again, some services are restricted in what they're able to do, so that can be important. Also prescribed medications, again, just restrictions on people, and then addiction and drug use. That can be important to a lot of service providers. They'll have a kind of a minimum days of sobriety, perhaps, that they need new intakes to have, and or they might have the services necessary for addiction recovery. So we do ask about that, again, just to match people appropriately. And then finally, there is a comment section, and we do ask that if you feel that there is any more pertinent information to the successful placement of this individual, let us know that. There is not right now a question on the forum to ask if they have a service animal or a pet that they want to be placed with, but that's actually very common. So that's a section that you would put that in. And again, just helping us to match appropriately. And then finally, this new form has a signature section. And so that is just a way for us to verify that the survivor has given consent for this form and information to be shared. And if that's not possible, if you're, say, working with someone over the phone, they can't provide a signature, we do ask you to sign as the advocate, just saying that I have in some form obtained consent. And we just do that to be honoring to the survivor. And yeah. All right, moving right along. All right, so that was a deep dive into the referral form. So like I said, communication, I can't say this enough, is kind of what ARS is made up of. I always say that it's half relationship and half system, and this is the relationship side. It's talking with one another. And again, some of these are time sensitive, so we do want to be good communicators. ARS does make an effort to match the referral with only those programs that meet the parameters that you express in the referral form. And then after that, the service providers who are eligible will contact you directly, and that's important to remember. So you may hear from many or few, depending on the current status with their intakes. It can also depend on your parameters. Some people are a little bit harder to find placement for just because of their higher needs. There are fewer services for certain individuals, and I'll talk about that here in just a second, but your responses can fluctuate relatively drastically depending on the status of the survivor you're working with. I do want to note, it's important to make time for the survivor to have time to assess any feedback that they get from programs that have an opening for them. And again, like I said, that's sort of why the process can take a little bit more time, but we also, if you as an advocate, as a case manager, can build in more time for this process to be meaningful, we really encourage you to do that within the bounds of finding placement quickly. Alternatively, be prepared when speaking with potential programs. The conversation could take on more of a tone of an interview from both sides. So I'm actually going to use Melissa as an example. She submitted a referral. She was working with a survivor about a year ago, and we kind of debriefed it after, and she was surprised when she heard back from programs, and she felt like she and the survivor were being interviewed when in her mind, she was like, well, no, I'm the advocate. This is my chance to assess you and see if you're the right fit for this survivor. Completely true, and we do want to balance that. Certainly it is a time for the survivor to be empowered to make a choice that is best for them, but also know that the service providers will also be assessing that survivor to see if they're a good fit for the current makeup of their program, their current staff, and just seeing if it's going to be successful. So do be prepared for some more kind of interview questions of you and that survivor. And again, it's going to be that two-way street most times. All right. And to kind of piggyback off of that, we do want to pay attention to the survivor experience as a whole. Note how many times the survivor is being asked to provide information, from working with you to filling out our ARS form to talking with service providers. They can quickly have to kind of retell points of their trauma or just personal information many times in a short amount of time. And it might have an effect on them before they even realize it. So do be aware of that. You're in a position to kind of be a little bit of a gatekeeper of their experience and just making sure that there's not too much pressure on them to disclose all of that information at once. Again, all this information is so necessary, but it is something to be aware of and just something that we've seen be a little bit triggering for survivors. And most of you know this, but it's worth retelling. Also be prepared to traverse expectations. So obviously survivor choice is important, but be prepared to help survivors mitigate expectations. This field is still pretty young and addressing the gaps in service. So there tend to be fewer programs able to serve. I'll rattle off a few. Fewer services for men, minors, unfortunately, trans people, those with pets and service animals, and people with dependent children. So typically, if we get one of these referrals, it could drastically reduce the number of options that we see on the ARS side from 60 to 20, or sometimes 10 or 3. Also pay attention to how those things can't change. And those are necessary kind of parameters for that referral. So be aware of preferences versus requirements, and know that there may be areas in which you need to compromise. So for instance, we might yield very few results for a male survivor. So we would ask them to be flexible, might consider moderate as well as low supervision. Would you be willing to consider faith-based programs in addition to secular? And it might be your role to mitigate some of those expectations with the survivor. We've also had people have to find alternative homes for their pets, which is really unfortunate, but we really do want to get them into a program that's going to serve them. So just be prepared to kind of deal with those intersections. Just kind of an interesting area of note, and I would ask you all to sort of be aware of these things. The interaction between faith incorporation and supervision level kind of have, they can have a canceling effect to some degree. And I really just observed this last week, and I shared it with my team and found it interesting. So we had several people looking for a program that would be faith-based and also require participation. But they also wanted low supervision. And I found in running that referral that those two sort of cancel each other out to some degree. As you can imagine, and this is not the case all the time, but a program that's going to have higher structure with their Bible studies or going to church will likely also have higher levels of supervision. So that's just something to kind of mitigate an expectation with survivors. And you certainly don't have to do this alone. I am the one running these searches, so I can kind of see where those things conflate, and I will let you know and deliver some options for you. If it looks like we're going to have a low yield in terms of options, then I'll tell you some areas we could maybe change and see if you and the survivor would be comfortable with that. So you're not alone. All right, getting here towards the end, we are almost done. I'm sorry, this is so much information. We have some resources for you. So obviously you're not doing this alone. Now that we have the online form, we did create a downloadable worksheet, which is essentially just the form in a version where you can print out. We realize in working with survivors and their advocates, it's a lot easier sometimes when you're asking these kind of difficult questions, these questions that are on the form, you don't want to screen in between you, although that's very difficult to do right now. But if you're in a position where you can sit across a table, you can print that out and kind of more casually work through that form with them and then transcribe the information into the online form and submit it. That's just a tool for you to use to make that conversation a little easier. Like I said, some receiving agencies do find it important to have a trafficking survivor verified that it is a trafficking case. So we also have a quick 10-question screening tool. And again, you can do that with them, or if you know their history, you can fill it out. You do not have to submit that with the form, but there is an area where you can indicate how trafficking was verified, and you can even list the screening tool just in case that gives receiving agencies a little bit more confidence. That's really what that's for. So it never hurts, or if you have an alternative screening tool, you can list that too. All right, and you can find these at our website along with some additional information, shelteredalliance.org/ARS. All right, so this is my chance to ask you for something. Like I said, we rely on communication, and I really rely on your feedback as a survivor advocate, as a referrer. One area that we love to hear back from you from is on placement status. So once you have gone through this process, you've talked to some receiving agencies and you found placement, we do ask that you let us know that you found successful placement or not. If you found an alternative solution, we like to hear where they went if possible. And that's internal information that we use for feedback, and when they got placed, so that we can assess the efficiency of the system and where we could potentially make adjustments. We also welcome system feedback. So if you have interactions that you want to report with any of the entities that are involved in this process, feel free if you have any recommendations. And I also rely on real-time feedback. So if you didn't get a confirmation email, let me know in that 24-hour period, because I can investigate and see what's going on. And I do appreciate that. We do handle and very high volume. So I love to hear from you. Also, if you know of programs that are new or existing in your area that you have a good feeling about and you want to recommend to us, yeah, let us know your friendly neighborhood shelter program, and we will add them to ARS. We want to collectively grow this system and this network, so we'd love to hear from you about that. Oh, and I wanted to make a plug in terms of that feedback. Something that we're trying to provide you all feedback with is that coming in October, we are launching our accreditation program. And what that's going to mean is that for all of the programs in our system who choose to go through that process, they'll carry kind of an extra seal of approval. So right now we do verify programs to see if they are operational, see if they're able to take new residents at this time. But this is going to take that to another level. So those who do opt into that, you guys will have kind of an extra layer of confidence in that program that they are serving with excellence. Yeah, that is going to be kind of a feedback loop for you and just kind of an extra layer of confidence for certain programs that you are going to be working to place a survivor in that program, and that they do have kind of a higher standard. So yeah, looking forward to that. If you do have any questions regarding what we talked about today or anything in general about the referral process, please do contact me directly. My email is here on the screen. And yeah, like I said, love to hear from you. Finally, follow us on social media and learn about all the cool things that we're doing.
For clarity, unfortunately, with 4 staff people reading through this PowerPoint, Calvin's email is not accurate. So I did put his correct email in the chat box, and it has been updated in the version that will be emailed to all of you as a follow-up this way. Yes. Yeah, you know, everybody knows when you have staff turnover, Kendall being such a essential part of our role, we're still learning all the roles that she played, one being facilitating the Zoom meeting, another being reading through our PowerPoints and editing them. So if you know a good editor, apparently we need them. So anyways, everybody, I put the correct email for Calvin in the chat box, and it'll be updated when we send a follow-up to this event as a recap, including the recording. So I think Calvin was mentioning this, but just as a plug, if you are not signed up yet for Sheltered Virtual, this is going to be even better than last year. And keep in mind, I know it's very tempting to register at the last minute because you want to decide if anything else is coming up. Maybe a fun vacation, maybe a super fun meeting. Sheltered Virtual will be more fun, I promise. But part of the fun of attending Sheltered Virtual is our attendee packet. We've got some really fun goodies, but you have to register early enough to where we can mail it to you in time. So if you wait for the last minute to register, you might not get the goodie bag in time. And what's the point in attending a conference if you don't get the goodie bag? Is it just me that likes all those freebie stuff? Well, we got some freebie stuff for you if you register in time. All right, Calvin, we do have a few questions, and the first one is from Selena, referring to a referral that she sent out, and I think this is a great question because other people experience it the same. So she submitted a referral. It was a little bit tricky because the referral did have dependent children, so none of the options that were sent out worked out. What does the referring agency do when they send a referral out and it doesn't work out for them?
So that is another one of those like excellent points of feedback that we'd like to hear from you about. Once you submit a referral and it's been a couple of weeks, we can always resend a referral. We can, I kind of have a good eye for looking at what options might be able to be opened up. And we can start to get kind of creative with a referral that might be a little bit more tricky. That is one of the biggest pain points is if we do have to send out a referral that's going to very few people, I do get reports that they don't hear anything back. If it's that case, I will typically kind of get more involved. I do ask if it's a very small handful, if it's going to be very difficult. I do typically ask service providers to contact you regardless of whether or not they're able to place, just so that you hear something back and know that those options are off the table. It is very painful to not hear anything, and we try to avoid that. So just communicate with us. We have sent referrals out multiple times, and 2 weeks could make a difference. A program could just have an opening that they didn't have 2 weeks before. So yeah, let us know. It kind of changes the process, but we'll get a little more involved and see what we can do.
Yeah. One thing, just a shout out to Calvin. He's exceptional at really assisting in some of these more complicated placements. A few weeks ago, we had one that it was a mom with her daughter, both being victims themselves, wanting to go to the same recovery program, although the daughter was a minor. So that was complicated. And they had 5 emotional support animals. So it was very complicated, but we were actually able to partner with one of our member agencies in the area that they were at and navigate that complexity. So some of them are harder, but we really, really are committed to supporting you in these efforts. And so if it doesn't work out the first time, Calvin and the rest of the team are happy to deep dive with you to figure out a solution for this. The next question we have is from Christian. Christian, I don't know if you see this, but we did add that link directly into the chat, which Christian asked for the screening tool. And so that link is right there in the chat right now. Thanks, Calvin. Yeah. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes before we have to log off. I know it's always exciting when a meeting ends soon, so we can certainly hope for the best on that one. But if you have any more questions, now's your chance. One final plug for our conference. We really want to make sure you guys are there. We have some exceptional speakers, October 19th to 21. It is still virtual, but we're doing a lot of great things to make it feel like it's in person. In fact, we just brought on board a event specialist who throughout the pandemic did virtual baby showers and bridal showers. So she's really excited to bring in some of those fun things to help it feel like you're really part of a community and able to network and be strategic with agencies across the country. So it's going to be a great time and we'll learn a lot. So with that, Calvin, closing thoughts?
No, I am just really grateful for you guys, and I appreciate what you guys do to help us help survivors.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
Definitely a community.
All right, we have one final question. Thank you, Nikki, for submitting it. And she said, do you have any advice for when we receive a referral and we respond, but then do not receive a response from the original agency? Calvin, I appreciate your reaction because it is not just you, Nikki. It is not just you.
That is, Nikki, I think you and I have talked about that before. That is it's probably the most difficult part of this process, because at some point we connect you, and then if nobody communicates, it's really hard. I know that a lot of, if you're kind of wearing your service provider hat, I will just say that a lot of advocates and case managers are probably overworked and they're kind of moving on to other cases. That's why I do encourage just making this a community and everybody communicate the best we can. Nikki, we're always happy to get involved and see if we can kind of lend our voice to get some response, maybe get some closure. Yeah, honestly, that's kind of the hardest part.
Yeah, for sure. And Calvin mentioned this at the beginning, but one of the things we really struggle with is data tracking in terms of successful placements, because people always ask us, oh, what's your success rate in placements? And we honestly have to say we have no idea, because so often when we send a referral, we don't know which agency took them. We don't know how long it took for the placement. And so it is so helpful for us if you could just send Calvin a super brief email saying, placed on this date. Thanks so much. And that's all, like, you don't have to be nice. It's just Calvin. Just let us know. Leah is asking, what's the time frame for the whole process? Leah, fantastic question. We actually ask ourselves this all the time. So Calvin, go ahead.
Yeah, based on the limited feedback that we have, I think as of this last year, placements were a little bit slower, probably due to COVID. I think we're averaging around, could be up to 15 days. Depending, the turnaround can be a few days. I've heard people reply in a day that they found placement. Again, it can really depend on that case. If it is going to be very few agencies that are going to receive the form, I will tell you and tell you what those like restrictions are. So I'll try to communicate those expectations as much as possible, but I would expect up to two weeks is kind of an average. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I think it's important to know that this is not an emergency tool. We do have partners throughout the country that offer emergency placement in short-term capacities, whether it's 2 weeks or less than 30 days. So if you're in an emergency situation, please reach out to Calvin directly, and he will try to partner with you for an emergency placement. Our referral system is really about ensuring the correct placement for long-term programming. And that takes time, because the survivor should have the opportunity to vet and interview and learn about the program. They're committing essentially 2 years of their lives to. So 15 days feels like eternity, but for quality placement, it really is necessary. So if it is an emergency situation, we can support that just outside of this traditional system. Yeah. All right, guys. I'm going to type in Calvin's email is right here. I'm typing it again now. And then we'll be sending it out as well. There you go, Jocelyn. All right, reach out to Calvin anytime. He's super, super available. And I so appreciate all of you guys being here. Thank you for being a part of this community and networking, because together we can make such a huge difference. So you guys are all fantastic. It's a pleasure to be working with you, and we'll see you hopefully in October.
Thanks, everybody.
So now we have the awkward bye, everyone.
Yeah, we'll wave you away.
Yeah.